you have to do your homework. I really think so. I think there's so much great technology out there that help you do things quicker, more efficient. I think you have to understand the process that the technology makes easier for you to really be good at it.
Today is Tuesday, January 28th, 2025. Who will be speaking with?
Matthias Heilbronn.
Um, Sometimes you've been given the nickname Maddie. Two questions. How did you get that name and how do you feel about that nickname?
Okay, so I started in the music industry in New York. I met Boris Lugos and Musti at some point during the Winter Music Conference. We connected. They came by Access Studios, looked at where we were working and stuff. And our friendship led to me working with Peppermint Jam, which was Musti's label. They had a studio over there. Um, and so then I started traveling back and forth. I was doing stuff over here, and I was doing productions over there. Completely different. Like over there was more. Musti was getting more into like mainstream pop artists and doing remixes like that. But I got some great work out of that. I worked with Bootsy Collins. I worked with Roy Ayers, um, Cindy Crawford. But I was managed by Musti's manager, Errol. And Errol felt Errol is from England through like he was born in Jamaica, but then lived in England and then moved to Germany. That Americans wouldn't be able to pronounce my name, and that's why he had to give me the name Maddie. So it was Matthias Maddie Heilbronn because he felt that it wasn't marketable to the American market, which was a big market at the time. Um, yeah, so that's I never liked it. You know, I still don't.
I will call you Matthias the whole time. I wanted to ask because I'm like, I've been, as you know, my name is super complicated to Americans. So I've been given nicknames which I have hated my whole life. So that's why I wanted to ask before I refer you to as Maddie the whole interview. Then you're like, this motherfucker, you know. Um, Great. Um, Question number one. Describe the moment you walked into the Paradise Garage and seeing Larry Levan spin. How did it change your perspective on music?
Oh my God. Uh, so there's I think this the stories about people going up that ramp are probably very similar, and I'm not going to tell you anything new. I had no idea what to expect. I was in New York. I was staying with friends. I ran into these guys from England that lived in on Weehawken Street, which is right off of Christopher Street on the West Side Highway. They had this little wooden building. It's actually one of the oldest wooden buildings in New York that's still there, and they call it the Sensible House. I don't know how I ended up there, but retracing my steps with a couple of people, I ended up being there with Morris Bernstein from Giant Step. He was also there for the first time visiting New York. We didn't know each other. And it was just a bunch of people hanging out. Justin Berkman, who then opened up the Ministry of Sound, was one of the guys that lived there. He was DJing, and they were taking turns, and we're just kind of hanging out, partying, what do you call it, pre-partying. Um, and then they said like, hey, we're gonna go to this club. It's membership only, but you can bring one friend. So if you guys want to come, we'll go there. So we walked from Weehawken Street to King Street, and they were saying like, you got to go. This is just the most incredible thing. But that didn't mean much to us. Uh, and then we got there, we saw the line. Um, and then walked in, and then there was this black ramp with the lights going up, and you would hear the bass getting louder and louder and louder. At the end of that walkway was a little window where you paid, and it was getting more and more exciting the closer you got. And then the door would open, and the music was pumping. It was crazy. So seeing that people, you saw the lockers on the left side, people were changing out of their doctor outfits into their dancing clothes, because they just came from the hospital where they worked or whatever. And doing exactly the opposite of what we would do, right? Like instead of dressing up, they were dressing down. They were putting on their sneakers, they were putting on their sweatpants and blah, blah, blah. So everything was different. And you had that crystal room with the blue lights. It was really weird and cold and didn't really know what that meant. And then you walked through the door and then you saw like these thousands of people, 2,000 people or whatever it was, dancing in this place. And that was mind-blowing. But through the course of the night, what was even more amazing was we found a little area. We were there like with 10 people, and you started realizing this is not people just dancing. Like everybody was dancing with everybody. It wasn't like one person dancing by themselves or two people dancing with each other. It was just everybody together. And then you started experiencing what was going on with the sound. And the sound was going up and it was going down. It was going left and right and coming from all angles. And you felt it like you've never felt any sound before. To the point where it's like, well, wait a second, why is he playing this record again? Right? Like, I don't remember what the big songs were there, but I think it probably was Devotion that came out around that time. And he played Devotion like 5 times in a row. He would just like play the record from beginning to the end and then take the record and put it back to the front and just play it again. And in the beginning, you're like, wait, did he not just play that record? And then you realized, oh my God, like he is breaking this record as we speak. And this is something that he really believes in. And then the more he played it, the more crazy the people were going. So a bunch of, like all these things. I had never heard house music as a genre like that before. So I was DJing at home. I was playing all kinds of stuff throughout my career, starting when I was 16, playing like soulful stuff, Whispers and Kool and the Gang and whatever. And at some point, I started playing some faster stuff like Colonel Abraham's or even Jack Your Body. But that was part of my set. That was just another record that fit into what I was playing. And then I come into there and I hear that this is just being mixed and this is a genre. I was also introduced to classics for the first time. I mean, like, I had like one or two or three songs that I heard before, but again, it was in Germany, that was not disco classics wasn't a genre. It was just whatever. It was disco, it was funk, it was soul, So these two categories together, from that moment on, I didn't play anything else anymore. I was like, I went to Vinyl Records the next day, Dance Mania, and just like looked for records that I had heard the night before, and I completely changed the style of what I was playing. And when I came back to Germany, because I was only here on vacation when I went to the garage, I brought records back, and I went to the owners of the club, and I said, you got to send me back. You got to send me back just to get records because there's something going on and we got to bring it over here. And you can't get these records here. So really what I wanted to is go back to New York and go back to the garage. And I needed somebody to pay for that. But and they were like, okay, yeah, I guess we can do that. Well, back then clubs were buying records for the club. I didn't have a record collection at that point. And when I started DJing, I didn't have a record collection. I was the bouncer, not bouncer. I was the busboy. I was, cleaning the glasses and stuff like that until one day on a Wednesday, the DJ didn't show up. And then I said, I can do it. But the records were all there. And that's what we did. We went record shopping. We got reimbursed for the club, and the records were at the club until that club closed, and we took a lot of the records that we had bought over the years, and that was kind of when it started. Like, I need to have my own style. Actually, I have to be honest. Very soon after I came back from New York, I started like having my own collection. I started not sharing what records I had. I used to like cover the labels and just write my little name on there. So when DJs were always at the DJ booth going like, what is this? What is this? What is this? And I wouldn't tell anybody. I was like, you do your research. I'm not telling you. Yeah, so that's how I ended up going back a couple of times, buying records and bringing them back. But that's also how I started my collection, and that's how I started becoming a house DJ and playing house and classics. I still had a reggae and a hip hop night on a different night, but that was my thing. I wanted to play house, I wanted to play classics, and I wanted to get as close to what I had experienced with the garage, which is, not that easy when you're in Germany, but good times.
What a story. Thank you for sharing. You mentioned working as a sous chef, according to
Okay.
my research,
Yeah.
before fully committing to music.
Hmm.
How did your culinary background influence your approach to music production?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. Um, I think that it all has to do with senses. Uh, Having an open mind, trying different flavors, combining different flavors. Um, I think it was always going to go into that direction. It was always going to go into the direction of creativity, whether that is combining flavors or combining different genres of music or different records or whatever. But I was always heavily into taste and hearing. So I don't know. I still cook to this day. I never went back into a kitchen, but if you look at my websites, you either see me putting up a mix or a picture of a dish that I just made. You know, I still love the two.
What was it like transitioning from the German club scene to the New York City club scene?
I Like I said, I started when I was 16, right? By the time I went to the garage and I came back, had a new I was very, very close to what was going on over here. I also had a very good friend that was in a band, and he was a DJ in Berlin at it was East Berlin, it was West Berlin. So when the East and West Germany was still divided, he worked at a club called The Jungle. The Jungle was like a very famous, hard to get into place where people like Bowie and Grace Jones and Iggy Pop would hang out. That guy had an amazing taste in music, and I don't know how he got the records. I think he was probably traveling as well, and he would record CDs, not cassettes all the time, and he would copy them and he would sell them through a friend of mine in Bremen at like it was a little clothing store, and that's where I would get my music all the time, and that's how where I got introduced to D Train, Jah Wobble, like the Francois kind of stuff, right? Very dubby. I didn't know what that was until I went to New York and I was like, well, wait a second, this is the stuff that I heard on these cassettes, right? But I started buying that music and I started aligning myself with what was going on at the Jungle. I actually ended up DJing there as well. Uh, and then my influence going to New York. When I went to New York, I went to a club a night. Every night there was something going on, right? So I was absorbing what was going on. I was listening to DJs. I was at Nell's. There was a 14th Street Lounge or whatever. There was so many places. The World at some point when I was living here already, Sound Factory, Trial, or blah blah blah. When I finally moved here, I was pretty established in Germany. I was traveling all over the place. I had a name for myself. I I was pretty confident. I felt like I was the shit, you know, on all levels. Like I felt like I had no problem getting into any clubs because I was rolling up there with that confidence and I just belong here. And I felt that way. I felt like not only do I belong in this club, but I also belong behind the decks because I can do this better than you. And I got gigs pretty quickly and pretty easily and it just worked. But I had observed and internalized already everything that I heard here because I was so mesmerized and I was so in love with what was going on in the music scene in New York.
How did your friendship with Frankie Knuckles develop? and what impact did he have on your early career in New York City?
So I met when I first decided to move here. This was like, so I was here a couple of times. I was going out, I was partying, I was buying records. I made some friends. I met Patrick, who was the roommate of Rob Spurdy, who was the manager at Access Studios. He was just an assistant engineer when I first met him, but the last time I came, when he was actually the manager of Access Studios, worked with Francois, and he said, "Look, if you want to work in the music industry, I can offer you an internship. You can come here. We'll figure it out. We'll make it work. We'll get some DJ gigs." Patrick was his roommate. He ran into me at dance at Vinyl Mania, and he was hitting on me. I was there with my girlfriend, but he was hitting on me, and he's like, "Oh, what are you doing? You're staying here. You're at a hotel. You can stay at my place, And I said, "Oh yeah, I'm here with my girlfriend. Can we both stay at your place?" Anyways, so he was really cool. He knew I mean, that was on 3rd Street, right? Frankie lived on 3rd Street. And they were friends. And I don't know if Rob Spurdy knew him as well at that time. But when we were hanging out, and when Rob offered me the job and the internship, and it became time for me to figure out, well, okay, so if I'm going to do this, where do I live? Patrick said, well, Satoshi Tomie is moving out of Frankie Knuckles' apartment, and Frankie is looking for a roommate. If you want, I'll introduce you guys. And that's how that happened. And it was not for a very long time, because Rob also had an apartment. He just had somebody move out. So I don't even remember how long I was living there, but it was enough for me to get to know him very well and leave an impression. And the impression was this: he was super friendly and inviting. He cooked for us, and he like, I felt at home right away, and he was such a warm person. But he kept saying to me like, Matthias, you come here like a cocky little white boy from Germany, and you think you're gonna make it, right? You know how many people are trying to do it over here? That's not gonna happen for you. Like, he just put me down on my ass. But what that meant for me was like, fuck you. Yeah, I'm going to do it. And it really motivated me. And I said, I'm going to show you that I can do this. And it was one of the reasons why I realized, hey, this is not going to be easy. But I also realized that he's challenging me, right? And I'm going to step up to that, because I'm not just some white boy from Germany. I meant to do this. I'm supposed to be here. This is my calling. I can do this, and I can do this well. The other funny story was that he came home while I was living there with the whistle song, and he whistled it to me, and I was like, yeah, that's not gonna work. That shit is corny. That is never gonna work.
Wow. Wow. Some dance music history. Tell us a memory from the Winter Music Conference.
Well, there's a lot, and there's a lot of memories lost just because of what the Winter Music Conference was. I remember getting going there, and after a couple of years getting really carried away, because it was parties every day. Starting at, you were going somewhere at 11 o'clock having a drink, and then going out until 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, and it was all alcohol and drugs. So I don't think I'm the only person that has memory loss from those days. I remember there was a situation where we stayed at the Villa Paradiso. I don't know. Musti somehow found this place. It was right off of 14th Street, and not Ocean, but the next one over. And it was really cute. It was cheap. We all didn't have that much money back then. and it had this garden in the front, and there were like birds that were making all kinds of noises. And that was a year when I was with Jody already. Jody that managed Francois and worked at Axis. Um, and she had organized an event. I think it was the event where I actually it was I don't want to lie about it. She did a lot of events there. We did something together with Peppermint Jam and Todd Terry and this and that. The point is this, she had the money in our room for all the talent in cash. And I had my records. We got outfits from different places because they were trying to take pictures with DJs. And I got all the promos that I had gotten. So there's a lot of value in that room. And overnight, somebody took they had guards over the window, metal bars that were inside the wall. Somebody took those bars out, went into our apartment and stole everything. Everything gone. All the records, all my records, all her money, everything gone. That was crazy. And the people at the front desk, they were just like, yeah, sorry, can't help you. Nothing we can do. Good memories. I mean, like the what were they called? The sessions with Tony Humphries, Ted Patterson, and who else was that? Was it David Morales?
The magic sessions.
Magic sessions.
Yeah.
Always memorable. Masters of Work. I mean, how crazy were we trying to make sure that we got to that party, that we got those promos? That's what we lived off for months, right? Getting those promos. I was good friends. I mean, I was doing Deep Zone with Mike Delgado. Mike Delgado was good friends with Kenny. I was good friends with Todd. So we were always on the list. But that was a must, you know. And literally, those were my heroes. Louis and Kenny were my heroes. Like I still can play a whole night with just their records. That was my vibe. That was what inspired me. They were different, they were edgy, they were not they were creating what was the new trend. They weren't going after anybody else's, you know? I loved every time I heard there was a new Masters of Work record out. God, amazing. The shows. And then our parties at GrooveJet were also so much fun. Playing with my friends, and it was a daytime party. I could, we were there with Musti, Boris played there, Todd Terry played there, Neil Aline, who I love. I don't know, you name it. Those are really a good memory in my mind as well. What was your favorite party in Miami?
Great question. There were many. The Masters of Work parties were legendary. I mean, to hear MAW play together, the live performances were amazing. The Magic sessions were unforgettable. That was the party to get into, and you wanted to get there early, and you were there until the morning, and you would leave, and you couldn't hear anything, but it was just the best memory ever because it was so loud.
Yeah.
What else? The Giant Step parties were awesome. Those were incredible.
Oh yeah, Morris.
Giant Step parties were great.
Yeah.
The shelter parties at the Shell Barn, those parties were, Timmy was unbelievable. Yeah, so just lots of great memories.
There's one more memory that is also a little bit sad, but it was the last time I saw Frankie Knuckles. It was a pool party. I think it was the hotel. It was on the other side of the street of the Delano, with a big pool in the back, and they had like a where you jump off of. Todd Terry was playing there, and Frankie was in a little cabana on the side on the left next to the DJ booth, and we were just kind of hanging out. Hector was there, and he was on crutches, and it was getting towards the end. So I just remember sitting there with him, and and I don't know if he had lost his leg already. I think it was, but it was really sad to see him struggle, you know. Um, he was in good spirit, you know, and he was still playing hard and whatever. But I remember seeing him, and that was the last time. I think that was the last time I saw him. That was sad. Work hard, play hard. Okay, so then she went into the back room. She said, okay, so it's not going to happen. He needs to go home. We're going to go home. So then we walk halfway through Body and Soul. And then I said, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. This is actually good. I like it. I want to stay. So we went back and I did this a couple of times until finally she got me into the back room and they sang happy birthday to me. And yeah, that was an interesting experience at Body and Soul. But there's so many more. I mean, Kenny Bobian live, all the live performances, um, Joe going crazy on the crossfader, the Casa Forte record. Do you remember that? That 16-minute Brazilian record that came out on a jazz label. Oh God. We Go Deep, Janet Jackson, Joe's mix. We can never actually hear the song because he was rocking the crossfader so much, or the not the crossfader, the EQ crossover. Sorry, yeah, great.
Wow.
Jody was the promoter for Body and Soul, so she did the guest list every week. We were very close with that whole situation. Yeah.
Tell us the story of how you met your wife, Jody.
Mm. Um, Jody started working at Access Studios. At Wave Records. Wave Records is Francois' label. Access Studios is Francois' studio. The label office and the studio office were on the same floor, right next to each other, in the studio, within the studio, right? So it was Aurelie and Jody was working there. Rob Spurdy and somebody else from the studio was on the other side in the other room. And then we had the small room. We had an edit suite where I worked a lot. We had the smaller room, and then we had the penthouse. I was working, well, she started working there. I kind of liked her. She was really cute. So, I was just kind of, oh, the first time I met her, it was really funny. I hope this is not going to be all drugged out story again. Um, I went to Basis, I went to Axis, and somebody said, "You want to have a puff of a joint? We're having a joint outside on the balcony." So I go outside, and they're hiding behind a door. They're in like a staircase, and they're smoking the joint. And the person that handed me the joint was Jody, and I was like, "Oh, who's this little cutie?" So I kind of was interested, um, but then I didn't see her for a while, and then it was Midem was happening. Everybody from the label disappeared and went to France, and Jody was the only one that stayed. I didn't know that, but I worked on Abstract Truth. We had a thing, and I was just finishing it, and it was one of those 2 day sessions that was just magical. It just everything just happened and worked, and James Preston and I were really vibing on it, and it was just, I mean, the song itself is just amazing, right? The original parts are great. Monique Bingham's lyrics are incredible. Her voice is amazing. I love her to death, and we worked on this remix. And James at some point left, and then I was doing the different versions, and I was mixing it and putting it down to that. And then I wanted to play it for somebody. I was so hyped up. I was like, this is probably the best thing I've ever done in my life. And the only person that was there was Jody. And I didn't know Jody, but so I went into her office and I said, you got to come. You got to come into the studio. You got to listen to this. And that was the second time I met her. And then we kind of hit it off. And I think that I impressed a little bit with the mix. And then when I left, she said, "So are you DJing anytime soon?" Oh no, she said, "Oh, she actually didn't say. She said, "I saw you DJing." And I was like, "I'm DJing?" I was like, "Okay, sure." It's like, "I'm gonna come to your gig." I'm like, oh, cool. I was DJing a lot. I wasn't sure what she was talking about. I was actually going out of town. And I was like, well, maybe I forgot about it. Whatever. So it ended up that she went to the gig. And then she went into the crowd. She's like, well, when is Matthias playing? And they were like, well, he's playing right there. And she's like, that's not Matthias. They're like, no, that's Matteo. So she confused me with Matteo and Matos, and she went to a gig for Matteo and Matos. And I said, oh yeah, okay, cool, I'll see you there. And so she went there and she was like, what the and I came back and she told me about it, and I really liked her. And I wanted to go out with her. I didn't really know how to do that. I was in a relationship for a while, and that was my only relationship that I had in New York and in America. In America, dating is very, very different, especially in New York from in Germany. In Germany, it's like you go out, you make eye contact, maybe you start talking a little bit, you see if you vibe, and then something happens, right? Mike Delgado, my friend, said, no, you got to go and you got to buy a girl a drink, right? And then that's how you get started talking. And, that's how it happens. And we were going out and they're like, hey, like their vibe, Kenny and Danny Buddha Morales, Mike Delgado, they were just like, they were like confident, inviting girls for drinks and buying shots and this and that. I tried that one time. I bought a girl a drink. She's like, oh, yeah, thank you. I just got to go and tell my friend that I'm over here. So she disappeared with the drink, never came back. I went to the dance floor and I saw her with her boyfriend, the boyfriend drinking the drink that I had bought her. And I was like, okay, this is not working for me. Anyway, so somebody told me about approaching Jody. Is like, just ask her to come somewhere where there's a couple of people, not like on a date, just, birthday party, whatever. So I invited her to come to dinner to a birthday party of my roommate back then, which was, I lived right above Satellite Records with, what's his face? Who owned Satellite Records? God, a long time ago. The girl's name was Colleen, and his name, God, he's gonna hate me. And it's just a blackout right now. Tip of the tongue. I'll come back to it. Anyway, so I invited her to that birthday party, and that was it. So we started hanging out. We started talking the whole night, and then we stayed together for 27 years, and we're still together.
Wow, what a story.
Mhm.
Let's go to the beginning. Where were you born and where'd you grow up?
I was born in Kiel, Germany. Kiel, Germany is a small town all the way in the north, very, very close to the Denmark border. My mom and dad studied there. Then my dad went to the south to help a professor somewhere in the south. My mom then moved us down, me as well, down to the south. We lived there until I was about 6 years old. And then when I was 6, we moved, and I was just finishing first grade. We moved to Bremen, Germany. Bremen is back in north. My parents had separated at that time. My father moved to Bremen to start the university over there. My mom decided that she wanted me to be close to my dad. Even though they weren't together, she wanted to be able for me to have my dad in my life. So she moved up to Bremen, which was a much bigger town than where we lived before. And I think it was a lifesaver because I don't think any of this would have happened. Like really small rural place to a fairly big harbor city, So then I lived in Bremen all my life until I moved to New York. And now I've lived in New York since 89. So what is it, 26, 30, 36 years? Long time.
Wow. You remixed for many major artists.
Mhm.
Many of these remixes were never commercially released. Share a story behind one of these lost remixes.
Oh my God. I'm gonna give you the one that made me stop working in the music industry. So obviously we all know what happened when we went from vinyl to CD, and then what happened when we went from CD to MP3, Napster, all that stuff. It was highly affecting my life, my financial, my well-being, my income, right? Because we used to put out records and sell somewhere between 1,000 and 5,000 records. That was good money, you know. All of a sudden, we weren't making any money anymore. You know, people were sharing the files with everybody. It just became a whole different ballgame. But also what happened at the major labels, they were losing money and they had to figure out how to compensate. So they just fired everybody. They fired a lot of the A&R people. I don't know if you remember that. So all of a sudden, the people that needed to be there were the financial people. The financial people were the ones that they had to keep because they had to keep the companies alive, you know. But you were missing the creative people. And so everything shifted. And the financial guys were like, we're not paying for remixes. They also couldn't make a decision on what is the next single. They weren't qualified to listen to an album and say, that's the record we're going to put out as a single. And this is the remixer that we're going to put on so that we can get there and we can get there and we can blow that record up. They didn't know that. They had 10 or 12 records, the songs on the record, and they were like, fuck it. Just send them all out. Send the acapellas out to everybody and their mother, and then we'll see what sticks. And if there's something that we like, we'll put it out and then we'll pay, right? Some people that were more established, that were making more money than I was and were at a higher level on the totem pole, they could say like, I want a upfront spec fee or whatever, right? So you would get at least some money. That happened in the beginning for a while, and I was getting $500 or something for a remix that I would work on for a while, whether it was put out or not. At some point, it was just no pay at all. And I was getting remixes for Beyonce. And the person I was working with was saying, this is Beyonce, you got to do this, right? If this works, it's going to blow up and blah, 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 right? I was working on 4 different Beyonce records in 1 year, and I didn't get paid one single dime. And you can imagine, high profile, a lot of pressure, got to make this perfect. I didn't do these mixes in 1 day or 2 days. That was extensive work that was put onto every single record. And I would hand that in, and they were like, yeah, we decided not to put this out as a single. So here's another one. Can you do this one instead? Right? But that was 8 months of the year. Like, it was a long time. I mean, I was doing other things here and there, right? But I was working a lot and I had no money. And I was so over her voice. I hated her. I hated this whole idea about I'm working on music that I don't like, right? I'm being told I need to do this because this is high profile. But that's like I was losing myself, right? Because it was there were certain people that were famous at the time, and so the I was told it's got to sound like this, it's got to sound like that. What is the guy? It doesn't even matter. I was going to tell you who the crew was that was putting out everything, and they weren't bad. It was commercial. It was simple. I could have done that, but because I was made to redo something that wasn't me, it never sounded like it. It didn't sound like me. It didn't sound like them. So it wasn't good music. My mixes weren't always great because of that, right? I was literally losing my self-confidence and myself, my sound more and more to the point where I was like, I'm not even enjoying this anymore, you know? And then we had a child. Our child was, I don't know how old he was at that point, but Jody was also saying like, look, dude, I know you love music and I know this is your passion and you think that's your calling. I'm going to have to say, if you're not getting paid, we're going to have to call this a hobby, right? You're going to have to figure out how to bring in some money because we got bills, you know? So that was it. I stopped. I stopped in the music industry. I wasn't enjoying it anyways. I was like that this is not what I came here for. This is not what I imagined it to be. And it could have been a mistake. I could have it just at that moment I was burned out and it wasn't going to happen. So it was a good move. I mean, look, if I'm following my same old friends on Instagram and I see this person DJing in Bali and that person playing in Brazil and I do get jealous and I'm wondering what would have happened if I had gotten through this, if I had stuck to my sound, if I had fired my manager at the time and gone through what a lot of people went through, because at some point our music wasn't popular anymore either, right? Everything shifted from New York to Berlin. DJ situation the same. Like people in Berlin or Europe were like, we don't need to fly anybody in from New York. New York is tired. We'll get somebody from Berlin. We get somebody from England. We get somebody from Holland or whatever. So DJ gigs were getting less and less. It was harder. The sound wasn't that popular anymore, which also creates something in yourself where you're thinking like, oh, I got to be more like that, right? If I want to get these gigs that are happening at Berkheim or wherever, I got to play more like this. I got to produce more like that. If that's not within you, then that's not going to work. You know, I think there would have been a compromise. There is a sound that I love, and it is techie and sometimes techno. And I've always been a DJ that loved to go through all kinds of genres. And even if you hear like my latest mix, I'll start at like vocal gospel and I end up at techno at some point. Uh, and that's kind of what I learned when I listened to people like um, Larry Levan, when I listened to Francois. Um, it's not about there's no genre. If you love music, it should all be in the crate, you know. It makes it hard for you to be advertised and sold as a DJ if you don't. I remember once England took over with music and dividing all these house music sounds into different genres because they thought it would sell better if we have tech and we have deep and we have two-step and we have right. It used to be dance music, it used to be house music. All of a sudden, there's all these kind of minimal music. There's whatever it is, right? I remember going and playing at a gig in Zurich, and I think I played one electro record. It wasn't even corny electro. It was a minimal party, right? So everything was minimal. And I was like, fuck this. I want to get some energy. And I played some stuff that hyped everybody up. And the gig was great. But the promoter was like, this is not what we do here. We only do minimal music, you know? It was ridiculous. So that was making it harder for us to DJ too, because if you're playing everything, how can you market that, right? The promoter is like, well, what do you play? I'm like, eclectic, I play everything. For certain people, it was okay. For Harvey, for Francois, whatever, that was what they were famous for, you know? But if you weren't on that particular level, it would make it harder for you to get DJ gigs. Because you didn't quite fit there and you didn't quite fit there and whatever. And you're like, well, what the fuck? It's just music. If it works, if the people feel it and it gets them excited and makes them dance, that should be okay with you, whatever label is on that. But that wasn't the vibe back then. Yeah, so I I I think from the moment when I stopped, when Beyonce killed my vibe, um, to the point where the music that I make and produce and I love became popular again, there was a pretty big gap. I don't think I would have survived that. I don't think I could have survived that with having a family, with having to pay bills. COVID hit at some point too, like there were some people that had a really hard time and suffered through that. There are some people that came out on the other end. Most of those people were already established, were making a lot more money, had records that were paying, they were still paying an income just from royalties. Look at Musti, for example. Musti, uh, kept going. He had other things that happened for me. He was on the German Voice at some point. He was getting money from Horny Horny, and he was getting money from Tom Jones. He didn't have to worry about that. That wasn't the case for me. You know, the royalties from We Had a Thing or whatever weren't paying my bills enough that I could go through a couple of years slump, continue what I was doing. I needed to start doing something else. And I got into teaching, and you know, for me, I went all in. I was like, I don't know the first thing about teaching. And if I want to do this, I want to do this right. I want to do this like I approach everything else. I want to do this better than anybody else. So I went headfirst into figuring out how to do this, reading books, going into classrooms, blah, blah, blah. So that absorbed my life and put me on a totally different path. And music went on the back burner. And then just, you know, I still was DJing a little bit here and there. And it just started happening like over the last few years that I got more into the music scene again. You know, I actually taught a music class at some point. I taught people how to work at Ableton and produce music at my school to high schoolers. That got me really excited. I had to learn a new platform because at my school they didn't have Mac, so the only thing that I could get on Windows was Ableton. And I made a connection with Ableton, but I had to learn Ableton. So through my course, I got excited about learning a new program, figuring out how to produce things. That's how I ended up doing like the remix for BBE, the Barely Breaking Even record. But with a completely different approach, like I don't have any pressure. I don't need this money, so I can take my time. I don't have to rush something out. I don't have to work on anything I don't like. I can work on things and not put them out. Who cares? Like as long as it makes me happy, you know? So that got me back onto the track of just kind of working on music again.
Wow, what a journey.
That was a mouthful. I'm sorry.
No, no, it was fantastic. It was great. Looking back on your career, what would you do differently?
I would have figured out how to promote myself better. I felt that I didn't need to do that. I thought music speaks for itself, career will come. I didn't think about an image. I didn't think about a logo. I didn't think about having a hype behind my name that is more of a product than a person, right? Um, Not product. I'm not using the right word, but maybe you know what I mean. Like, yeah, like this is it. This is the whole deal, and that's what it is. I never did that. I think we would have had a chance back then with Deep Zone, maybe if Mike and I had stayed together. Um, I don't know, but it was necessary, and I saw that the people that were successful were in the news all the time. They had a promoter behind them. They were, you know, they were hyped. I never did that. And I don't think you can survive in the music industry without that.
What advice would you give to the next generation?
Oh. I think that you have to do your homework. I really think so. I think there's so much great technology out there that help you do things quicker, more efficient. I think you have to understand the process that the technology makes easier for you to really be good at it, right? Um, I remember that when in my music course, at some point, I got to a point where trap was really big. And I had two guys, two knuckleheads, ninth graders, and that they loved trap. But they showed no interest in learning how to create sound, making your own sound, right? Making your own melody. Beats, yes, but the beats on trap music are so simple. It takes you about 2 seconds to put something together, and it sounds fairly decent. They didn't want to know about EQing. They didn't want to know about sound effects because they would just get a library. They would just buy a library of melodies, a library of sounds. They would just sample something, and then they would have their 4-bar beat that was like 3 things, and it would repeat, and then they throw a melody on there, and it was done. They're like, "This is it. It's great." And I'm like, "None of that is yours, dude. Like, no, it's not great." "But why? It sounds great." I'm like, "You know how many people have that sample that you just used? Everybody that bought that pack has that sample. There's nothing originally of that." And they're like, "Well, it sounds just like Yeet. Yeet does this, you know? So why shouldn't I be doing it?" That's the point right there. It's garbage. It's recycled bullshit. There's no creativity involved. Nothing comes from the heart, and everybody's going to feel that, you know? And it's this, it's if you're give you another example. A lot of times I hear music on Traxsource and it's a sampled disco record, and I'm like, what the fuck? Can you at least get the sample and your music in the same key? You're taking somebody's vocal, you're taking Lolita Holloway, right? Have some respect, first of all, bitch ass motherfucker. But then putting it on a track that you probably sampled, and they're in different keys. And you can't even figure that out. You should not be putting out a record, right? You should learn what keys are, what works together. If you can't hear it, then learn it. Teach yourself. You have a responsibility. The problem is that you get plenty of people that have no idea that it's off key, that it's in a different key, and they still buy it, which is even more frustrating, you know? But I think that, yes, if you can take a sample of something and make it different and fuck it up, and it turns out that people like it because something works there, by all means, please go for it, because it's part of what we do. It's part of how we create music now for a long time. Uh, but understand where it's coming from, understand why why it works and how it works. Don't just take 2 fucking things, throw them together and call it a day. You know, this person's beat, that person's music, that person a cappella, and I have a song. No, you don't. You stole from 3 people and you have no idea why this is not working. Same thing with technology when it comes to DJing. I think Tractor is fantastic. But if you don't know what it means to actually mix 2 records together, I don't think you should be working on Tractor. I think you need to figure out how to adjust beats. I think you need to figure out how to hear whether 2 songs work together. You need to figure out, hey, how do I make these 2 beats do 2 beats work together? Just because the tempo is right doesn't mean that the beat works. Like a 6/8 with a 4/4 might work great, depends on how you loop it, but you know, it probably won't. So are you making what you're doing and you're putting together better? Are you doing something with it where you can go like, oh yeah, that's the shit? Or is it just what anybody can do? I can hit the sync button and I can play, and it's 2 records mixing together. Doesn't mean does it work? That work. And then also what we're forgetting is okay, so you play your 2-hour sets fine. Do you know how to rock a crowd? What happens when the people go off the dance floor, right? How are you going to get them back? What does it take? Anybody can play the hit record or one hit record after the next, and yes, you probably have a good chance of everybody staying. But can you do that to the music with the music that you actually like? Like, can you introduce music that nobody's heard before, and you can still pack the dance floor while you're doing it? Can you play 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, 12 hours? Can you do that? Can you tell a story? Can you take somebody from one point to another with them going like, oh, fuck, I'm so tired of this shit. You know, can you play for 4 hours and go have people excited because it's changing, it's moving, it's working with your feelings? I think that's important. You know, I'm going back to vinyl right now. I got so confused when we were playing CDs and we were burning stuff onto the CDs, and we just had these little labels with the black writing on it that we printed out from our printer. I was so lost. We had more records than ever before. Had to listen. Like if you wanted to really go through Beatport and listen to what happened that day, it was what, like 1,000 records that you had to listen to, especially if you're listening to more than one genre. And after 200, your ears are burned. So more music than ever, no relation to anything. It was really hard. So I always missed playing vinyl just for that. You spend time going through what you're going to put in your crate. You know exactly what song works with what. You know when you pull out the label, what record that is. You have feelings attached to that, right? Like I would play a record and then I would go through my record case and I see something and I could hear the music with the other song that's playing right now because you have an attachment to that, right? So I'm going back to that. I mean, I still have my tractor and I can still play with my USB stick and the CDJs and whatever, but there was something about that. There was something that people are missing now. And you know, you also hear a lot of these songs that came out and they're redoing that. I think you also have a responsibility to go back and listen to the originals. Isn't there like there's a new mix that Michael Gray did of a Prelude record, I think. It's like, why? Just play the original. Listen to the original. See why that's different, right? And you won't be able to play that on tractor with the sync button because it won't sync.
Last question. What do you want your legacy to be?
Oh God. My legacy, I want to be somebody that people feel that was there to support, that helped them, that was there when they were in need or when I don't know. I want to be remembered as somebody that was giving something, not just taking something, and I'm trying to do that at school here. I work with students all the time. But it's the same thing with music. Music changes people's lives or it gives them joy in a moment. I want that to be remembered, like remember that night when Matthias played, or remember that record. Remember the feelings that you had when you had that record. Something positive, something that gave back. And I'm not done.
And the last question. If people want to book Matias for a gig, what's the best way to make that happen?
You can contact it. Sorry.
I was gonna say, should they go to the IG or do you have what's the best way if they want to book you for a gig?
Yeah, the initial contact through IG. And then if I need to pass that on to somebody else.
Tell people what your IG is.
Oh, good question. Just put my name in. Just put my name in. It'll be that.
Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate your time. Great to connect after 25 years.
Yes,
Great
great.
storytelling. I feel like we can do a part two because I feel like we've only scratched the surface. You have so many more stories to tell. So let's park that. We're gonna do a part two in like 6 months or so.
Okay. I'm up for it.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take
Have
care,
a good
man.
day. Bye-bye.
Take care.